Okay, the reason that we chose to look at The Office is because
It has
both
the same-
stylistically and tonally it's quite similar to what we're trying to do. It's got the same embarrassing, almost unbearable humour that's very realistic and grounded. I mean, obviously we're mixing it with something that isn't realistic. We're taking a context that is very fantastical and giving it the realistic tone of The Office. So we just looked at an episode of The Office, season 2, episode 1, just to look at how they create that unbearable, embarrassing, realistic humour. So, I mean, the first thing is obviously the character of David Brent, who is, in a way, he's part of the makeup of the inspiration for our main character. Not entirely, but he's an element of it.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. David Brent is an arrogant, look at me, I'm so cool,
Desperate
desperate as well.
But I think the key with him is that he's sort of understandable. He's not hateable or contemptible.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is him trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Trying to be funny, and some of the most embarrassing bits are where he over-explains something that could have been perceived as offensive but wasn't. It's the sort of desperation not to be embarrassing and contemptible that actually makes him all the more embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like when he tells a joke and has to explain it, or when he digs himself holes and makes things worse than they actually are, when it would have been so much easier for him to say nothing.
Yeah.
That's one of the key parts of him. But it's also that he's genuinely trying to be nice. He's not. He is a nice guy. He just says the wrong things or doesn't think properly.
Yeah.
And
Kind of like him.
And he's so desperate to be the
Liked
cool,
by everyone.
likable boss, which is sort of what our character is a bit. So, not only that, but I've looked at the mannerisms of David Brent and the kind of things he says and the way he talks to the camera when he's being interviewed on his own, and I've tried to replicate that in the script with little things like the words he uses occasionally, like chill and things like trying to be casual and cool, or the way that he'll explain something in a way that is unnecessary and not needed.
Yeah.
And that makes it all the worse.
Also his sarcasm.
His not very good sarcasm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another part of The Office that we need to look at was the actual look of The Office. So do you want to talk through that?
The look of The Office is sort of like very mundane, very grey, very boring, really.
It's the it couldn't look more boring.
Yeah. I mean, as with The Office, a thing that goes between shots
the motif of the
is the motif of a photocopier.
Yeah.
As the drawers move up and down.
And that's how they
And it
show
goes
the
to
passage of time. We
clunk.
look at that.
Look, look. It's very slow,
Yeah.
it's very dull.
And repetitive.
Yeah.
I think probably the key there. It's repetitive. The shots, because ours is a documentary too. The things you notice are like panning between people because obviously it's supposed to be spontaneous within the context of the show.
Also
So
zooming.
It's moving, zooming, but in an obvious zooming way,
Yeah.
not in a seamless way, in a sort of zoom way,
Yeah.
because it's documentary and film spontaneously. But that doesn't mean that there aren't shots that are still quite carefully planned out. We noticed at the very beginning there's a setup where there is Martin Freeman sat in the left corner of the shot, and there's someone else over there. I had to think about that. And then David Brent comes in, sort of around here from the background, so things are still. It gets everyone into the shot
Yeah.
in a quite planned out way, almost like a play.
Yeah.
The way they sort of came in was kind of theatrical.
It is very the framing as well.
Mm.
It's more the framing, how you've got the person who isn't really enjoying the Muppets theme tune and just trying
Just
to
on the
work is on the
outside.
left, whereas everyone else who's having a bit of a laugh and who's having just a good time but not really being very professional is on the right.
And the key thing is that is him coming, is David Brent coming in about here,
Yeah.
just peeking around the corner. It's all
Yeah.
very deliberately framed quite well.
And also when he's trying to fit in with the new crowd, he tries to tell these really bad jokes, and
They
the
hurt.
crowd, yes, and the crowd is at one side, and then David Brent is just sort of just outside the little circle of
Yeah.
people, just going, "Oh, I shouldn't be drinking. I shouldn't really
Oh,
be
that
drinking."
bit, yeah. And nothing's. Another important thing is that the delivery of the lines needs to be quite realistic as well. No one says anything like it's a joke. It's
Yeah.
not like a sitcom where someone will say something and pause. It's said like it's real.
Yeah.
It needs to be good delivery with stuttering and like false starts and people repeating themselves.
It has
and-
to feel natural.
yeah, it is not typical sitcom delivery at all. Nothing is said as a joke. Even
Yeah.
it's like you imagine that when it comes to playing, you almost have to play it as if you're not making a comedy, but are making just like straight things.
Yeah.
And-
Classic point in case. Is it point in case or is it case in?
Case in point.
Case in point, at the first interview with Martin Freeman, he false starts, stutters,
When he's talking about what he wants to do.
yes.
Yeah.
And he also looks at the cameraman, not the camera, which is actually quite a good thing.
Yeah. And there's like other little things like knowing glances at the camera.
Yeah,
Like David Brent will be desperate for the attention. He'll say something funny or
Like
that he
a
thinks
joke,
is friendly,
and
and then he'll just sort of like not like look at the camera, but will just sort of go to the camera for a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
a little look, only
So-
for a split second.
you know, I shouldn't really be drinking. It's, you know, I've got a very problem.
Yeah, other characters, the Martin Freeman and the one called Gareth. The one from Pirates of the Caribbean.
The one with the pudding bowl haircut.
Yes. They have. This wasn't intentional. This was just something we noticed when we were watching it. They're quite similar to the characters. The other superheroes
Yeah.
that aren't our lead superhero. They have quite a strong resemblance to them in the way they bicker.
And it's also very petty, it's just over tiny little
It's
things.
so childish.
Yeah,
It's like the way he argues, like when they're arguing, like, oh, actually, I'm Sables, whatever he says.
yeah.
And no, I'm team leader. It's like they're children fighting over which.
No, I'm the tallest. Well, I'm older.
And you get the sense of like how frustrated Martin Freeman is just being like alone with him. But for the way he delivers it, just sort of like he's letting it all out, just going like, no, your job is one that they give to a div kid at school.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's basically just them sat there for that whole conversation as well, which is quite similar to our scene when our two characters were quite similar, have their argument. They just stood next to each other for the whole thing, no moving or anything. And it's more unbearable that
Yeah.
way because it's static and you're just there and it's like, oh god, you want to get away, but you can't. It's closed and unbearable, you know.
Yeah.
There are establishing shots of the office where you'll just
See Slough Industrial Estate and
or
really dull 80s
just
building.
establishing shots of what's within the interior of the office, which will be just some people sat down working. We'll keep it on for about 2-3 seconds,
Yeah.